Hi, it's Dwyer. June 23rd, 2023. Gamblersadvisory.com, a free site. Wealthspinning.blogspot.com, a free site. Let me also say, too, if you're going to use the wealthspinning.blogspot.com site, I encourage you, and it's a free site, to look at the desktop version, which actually has far more information than the phone version. Just go to the settings. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Nothing I say in this video should be construed as investment advice, right? I'm just sharing what I'm doing. Everyone watching this video should think for themselves and should do their own due diligence. Now, let me just point out, I'm just a small business owner, right? So, when you're a small business owner and you have to collect money from clients, you notice certain trends in the economy, right? I'm just telling you that a lot of people are financially stretched right now, right? I have a lot of clients, longtime clients, who suddenly can't pay their bills in anything remotely resembling a timely manner. Right? I understand there are things going on in the economy. Whatever's being reported on cable television, even here on the internet in some quarters, might not accurately represent the extent to which people are struggling. And I'm here in Northern California, right? In many ways, I feel like I've become a bank for many people. Well, let's talk about, in realistic terms, in very basic terms, the continuing acute risk for more inflation. What I'm going to do is focus here on the United Kingdom. Again, I'm in Northern California in the United States. But we're going to focus on the United Kingdom because certain things have happened there that I believe are going to be exported to other countries. Right? Understand, inflation doesn't just stay local. When there's inflation in a place like Argentina, that's going to impact the people who do business with Argentina, both in Argentina and abroad. Right? When inflation goes on a rampage in Turkey, that's going to affect the people who do business with Turkey. I encourage people watching this video to look up and research the inflation numbers for Argentina and Turkey. Well, in the United Kingdom, understand that core inflation recently hit the highest it's been since the early 1990s. Right? The Bank of England recently raised its rates a full 50 basis points. So now the interest rate is at 5%. Now, the UK's mortgage culture is very different than ours in the United States. There, homeowners refinance every few years, right? 5 or so years. To the people watching this video who are in the UK, please leave your thoughts in the comment section of this YouTube video. Now, the rates in the UK, the mortgage rates, are not locked in for 30 years like they are in the United States for fixed rate mortgages. The Bank of England hike in the interest rate will almost certainly lead to hardship among UK homeowners who will soon have to pay higher, much higher mortgage rates. Now, last year's winter was a mild one. This year's might be a lot colder. The Russia-Ukraine war rages on. Energy is scarcer now than it is during peacetime. Right? Many European countries are trying to go without Russian energy. Understand that UK energy users might find it harder to heat their homes. I believe, by the way, that savvy investors are investing right now in LNG, liquefied natural gas. I like EQT. Look up that company. I've mentioned it in earlier videos. And in fossil fuels, right? I like Exxon, XOM, right? I also like XOP, Occidental, Chevron. Well, what I want people to focus on here is the leadership at this economically fragile time. The British Prime Minister is a young, photogenic guy. Emphasis on the word young. He doesn't have Winston Churchill's experience. Now, politicians in the UK are still pretending that everyone will be paid their full pensions down the road, and that their goal of 2% inflation will happen in a few months. Now, the way inflation really works is when you have tough times like this, when constituents start to complain of high persistent inflation causing high food prices, high mortgage rates, that makes paying for their homes too expensive to afford, higher energy prices that makes heating their homes too expensive, higher unemployment, which is what happens in a recession. What do you think the politicians and central bankers are going to do to ease the misery, to prevent the social unrest, and to keep their power? I believe the answer ultimately will be to quietly cause more inflation. Right? I'm expecting inflation to linger for now. Understand, inflation comes in bursts. You may have heard in the United States, oh, inflation's trending down. That doesn't mean inflation's going to continue to trend down. What I want younger people, people in their early 20s, the people who watch my boxing videos here on YouTube, what I want them to do is to talk to older people who were adults in the 1990s. You might be astonished to learn that back then you had something called certificates of deposit, where people were earning 4 and 5% on their savings. Right? Understand, the inflation rates in the United States might seem high. They're actually at historical norms right now. What was abnormal was the artificially low interest rates we had before. Right? So I'm expecting interest rates to linger for a while at these levels. I'm expecting inflation to be persistent. Folks, people are still traveling. People are still spending money. People are still eating out. People are still using their credit cards. The mood isn't one where people are restraining their spending. I understand some markets are down. The housing market's cracking, right? The Airbnb market is cracking. I'll agree with that analysis. But just understand, older people who have lived through recessions know that the mood right now is simply too giddy. Right, folks? Understand, in the UK, where there have been concerns of inflation for months, the numbers were elevated in May and June. Right? Just understand that. So, with an expectation that inflation is going to linger, that politicians are going to be hesitant to pursue austerity when everything hits the fan and people start to say, look, I can't pay my mortgage. When I bought the house, interest rates were artificially low. I didn't understand that at the time. Now that interest rates are high, I can't afford the house anymore. Right? When faced with really a possible rebellion, I believe you're going to have tactics like you just had in the United States, where Fed Chairman Powell says, hey, we're pausing. We're pausing. And then, of course, has to add that this doesn't mean that the Fed won't be raising rates in the future. In other words, folks, they're pausing for political purposes. Right? The inflation monster is still out there untamed. So in this world, things that the politicians can't just increase the supply of, in my opinion, are where you want to invest. Right? One of the primary investments, and I understand this sounds speculative for many, right? Apparently not Blackstone, not Citadel, not Fidelity. One of the primary investments people want to consider is Bitcoin. Because, of course, Bitcoin has a limited supply. Because politicians can't randomly increase the amount of Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin can be traded peer-to-peer. Right? There's no single point of failure. Lord knows I expect the politicians to try to find a way to stop Bitcoin at times. Right? But just understand, in an inflationary environment, the items that the government cannot increase the supply of, cannot inflate, are the items that will appreciate in value in general. So Bitcoin right now is a compelling, and I mean compelling, investment. Understand, Bitcoin halving is going to happen around this time, in fact, a little bit earlier than this time, next year. Look at the history of the price of Bitcoin on its way to Bitcoin halving. Right? I discuss cryptocurrencies in greater detail on my Substack page, Dwyer70905.substack.com. Right? Just be advised that that site has a paywall. Well, let's continue. In addition to Bitcoin, I believe energy, and I know oil is down and people are complacent, and we're hearing that things are better than they were last year, and that Germany has a lot of natural gas stored. Right, folks? I believe energy is one of the places you want to be. I mentioned EQT earlier. I mentioned some energy plays earlier. I believe they're great investments. I still view gold and silver as great investments, right? When politicians start to inflate to reduce the social unrest, because I'm telling you, when people lose their jobs, when people feel that their mortgage rates are out of control, when it's a cold winter day and you don't have the money to heat your home, folks are going to take to the streets, right? I'm just telling you, when there's social calamity, you'll be surprised how well gold and especially silver does, right? Silver right now is more underpriced than gold. Let me also mention this too, and people need to consider this. I know everyone is hot and bothered by AI. What I want people to do is to remember back when we were all hot and bothered by desktop computers. Right, folks? Understand, a lot of people started using desktop computers back in the day. This is before laptops took off. Right? Many of the companies back then, even when consumers were flocking to the technology, many of the companies back then did not make it. The fact that AI is a potent technology doesn't mean that everyone involved in AI is going to make it. The future is murky right now. Now, as I mentioned in other videos, right, just understand you want a company that's on the cutting edge of AI who also has other product lines, other aspects of their business. Let's go one step further. AI requires large language models, right? Huge. The amount of data that you put into an AI unit really determines how sophisticated that AI unit has a chance to become. So, what I want people to consider, and I know there are a lot of AI companies out there and things like that, right? But what I want people to consider are the limited number of companies that have the huge databases to create the huge language models, large language models, that you would then use to program artificial intelligence units. We know that Google has access to a lot of data, don't they? We know that Amazon has access to a lot of data. We know that Microsoft has access to a lot of data. We also know that each of these companies has a lot of product lines, including, of course, very robust cloud systems, right? Amazon Web Services, for example. The way I see things is that these are the companies that you want to consider in investing right now in artificial intelligence. I know a lot of people are flocking to semiconductors. Okay, fine. Things are hazy there. NVIDIA, depending on who you talk to, might be undervalued, might be hopelessly overvalued right now. There's going to be a bit of a shakeout with semiconductors. But I get the feeling that whatever happens in the AI race, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft are going to survive. Right? Let me also talk a little bit more about deceiving stats. I talk with friends. They're telling me how one of the underreported stories is that the S&P is up more than 10% and seems to be doing well under Joe Biden. right? Many of my friends are Joe Biden supporters. What I want people to realize is that this market has almost no breath, right? You'd be surprised how companies like Meta, Amazon, Google were all laying off people just a few months ago, right? It was traumatic, right? I met some people who got laid off from Google, right? Well, understand that labor tends to be one of the biggest expenses that companies have. When you lay off literally thousands of workers, Google it, right? As many of these tech companies did. Well, of course, your next quarter is not going to have those labor costs. Well, just understand that the S&P being up 24% over the last 245 days is a bit of an illusion. Because, of course, since December 1st of last year, understand that Meta, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Tesla, Nvidia, as a group are up 53%. Right? That small slice of the S&P 500 has distorted the numbers. Just understand that most of the S&P has been relatively flat during that time period. So if you had stock in Nvidia, okay, you're in the penthouse right now. Right? But if you had stock in most S&P stocks outside of big tech, outside of the big tech companies that were laying off a lot of people, you're not in the penthouse. Right? The economy is a bit of an illusion. Right? As Jim Cramer says, there's always a bull market someplace. That bull market has been in tech, not in the general economy. Right? So just understand, things are more fragile than any of us want to admit. Right? Don't be fooled by the numbers. Look a little bit deeper. Recognize that we're coming up on a presidential election in the United States. Politicians are going to try to put their best foot forward to convince you that things are better than they are. I need for folks to realize that in Europe right now, countries like Germany are in recession. Understand, the Bank of England is not the only bank to have recently raised rates. Right? Understand too, these rate hikes come with a lag. In other words, they hike your rates. You say, hey, hon, we're good because our mortgage doesn't reset for another 6 months. Well, what happens at the end of those 6 months? You better hope both you and your wife still have your job because you'll be paying more for the same house. Right? Think it through. Recognize how fragile times are. Recognize that inflation is persistent and that any assumption that the people in power have mastery over economic conditions is a misguided assumption at best. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.